Steve Gurdak is the group supervisor for the Northern Virginia Financial Initiative, or the HIDA, as we know it in the AML community. And given all the challenges in the past month or so, wanted to check in with you and ask you a couple questions about the SAR process. But first, how are you and your wife doing, and your staff? How are folks handling the virus quarantine?
Fortunately, so far, there's nobody in my direct sphere that has had the virus. There's an old associate of mine who I hadn't seen in 6 months, whose wife went through it. But so far, nobody in my sphere has been tested positive anywhere yet. But we're all pretty separated right now, as you and everybody else are out there.
Right. It's uncharted territory, as they say. So
different.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of messaging come out from FinCEN and FBI and IRS warning folks of scams, and we've seen that banking agencies remind the financial sector to continue to do their BSA oversight. So we get all that, and I'm sure that that's something that you encourage the filers to do. But as a user of SARS, how has it been any different, say, in the past couple of months? And then I just want to ask more specifically about your SAR review process, but just in general, in terms of how you receive and go through the SARS. Obviously, since not everybody's together, there is some difference in terms of process, but tell us how it works, how it worked before, and how you're dealing with it now. It's in terms of when they come in, you review them, and your team and your collaborators work to decide who's going to work on what case.
Well, since you've been with us several times over here, where we've gone through different methods of trying to do this, it still remains a very inexact science. However, now we're doing a little better in the sense I like, in that our latest prosecutor that's joined our team decided that we need to disperse or disseminate the SARS to a much wider audience earlier on, which seems to be working quite well. Before, where you've been here and we'd literally start with a stack of SARS that the law enforcement entities would review. Now we're actually disseminating the monthly downloads we get through the IRS to the entire law enforcement sector. So they have a lot more time, and they're done in a fashion now between the programs we have it on, that they can keyword search from their own platforms better. So by the time we get to our SAR review, which now is kind of virtual, we'll have a virtual meeting coming up this Friday with the latest stuff. Then you have a lot of different input with the agencies out there saying, not only picking the SARS that they think is slated for them, but also looking at SARS that they think others in the group that they've intertwined with may work, and that we call it referring out a lot. It's, they'll look at one going, hey, this is the one that the people from the Afghan relief thing, SAR, might look at. Hey, here's a person we need to get this over the DOD people, that type of thing.
So, that's really interesting because as you know, because you've been kind enough to do training and speaking at conferences for many years, that some in the financial sector, and I say in error, like to suggest that SARS go into the old proverbial black hole. They don't all get looked at. But your example is a perfect example of both the review process is comprehensive, and secondly, as you just mentioned, the referrals, looking out for each other. Like, what agency I may not find this particularly valuable to what I'm doing, but I know that Joe or Sally in another agency will. So that's a process that works really well for you folks.
It does, and this idea that can I say all SARs looked at? Not a chance. I mean, there's just too many of them. But
sure,
the commitment that we're seeing to SAR review teams, I've never seen it higher than lately. I mean, as you know, I was invited to a conference about SAR review team leadership in December through DOJ, and everybody should know that every U.S. Attorney's office, by directive, is supposed to have an active SAR review team coordinator. Our area, we have a great one here in Virginia. There's a great one in the DC district now, and in Maryland. We're all we all got together and we're coming to an agreement of what makes this thing work and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to better it. So it is a pretty good environment for law enforcement, at least looking at SARS.
So for a very simple process, how's the decisioning for what SARs get in front of you? So when they get filed, what are you guys getting? Because you said obviously you can't look at all SARs. I totally agree with that. But the fact that there's these stacks that are virtual now, but used to be real life stacks you go through. How does all that get in front of you? So what's the process of getting from the filing to your desk, as it were?
From the filing to my desk, it kind of stops at the IRS on the way. Our IRS coordinator out in Vienna there does, we call the initial download, but that is based on the criteria, the keywords, the search parameters everybody in the group is asking to be put into the system. And if you watch the email exchange back and forth, there's just a lot of banter of what needs to be added. And, we don't need to add that because DOJ has already added that. And it's just a lot of back and forth of, okay, what are the key things we're going to pull out of the data? So we literally now get 4 or 5 different loads based on different criteria. My team, as you know, I'm not really heavy Dalek centric. I'm looking for, I'm one of these people, I believe in the micro world of the small mistakes can send you the biggest cases, but there is places where they really don't want to look at SARS unless the value is substantially more than I might look at. But then you have different players that want to look at any, like DOD might want to look at more SARS, anything military related, and anything that could be contract fraud. You've got now we've got some state agencies looking at stuff. So everything that the search terms are opened up quite a bit. It still doesn't get them all. There's reasons it doesn't, but it's better than it had been.
So one of the things that has been stressed over time is having the filers improve how they write and craft a SAR. And I think you and I've had this conversation. I was surprised when I was testifying for Congress a couple of years ago, and one of the co-panelists made the statement that basically narratives were a waste of time, which I thought was so counterintuitive. Now that you have search words that get improved over time and all of that, how do you, when you tackle a SAR that you decide you want to work or your team wants to work, how important to that process is the narrative, and what sort of recommendations do you make to filers to craft them? FinCEN does its own training. There's a PowerPoint on how to do it, what words to use. But you as one of the ultimate users, what do you like to see in a narrative, if anything, that helps you?
Well, it's, we go back to some of the original, especially if you're just physically reviewing it. It is important because a lot of the search criteria is keyword based. I wish I could change that, but that's not we're not able to do, there's just such limitations about as many people as you have. So getting a keyword in, especially that first paragraph or two, it's back to the old thing. I think I've spoke this years ago at the ACAMS conferences. You got to be like a reporter that catch us with that first paragraph. Give me a reason to read further. And that's kind of still a key everywhere, getting that key item in there that hooks you in, just like every TV program does to, while you're going to sit through the next commercial break. No, this is very interesting because you grab me in that first 2 or 3 sentences.
Oh, that's helpful to know. Lately, meaning, I don't know, the past year or so, what have been the major, that you can talk about, the major cases that emanated from SARS, either that built on an existing investigation or something that you guys sort of identified at the front end, that either have been completed or things that you can talk about? What have been, I know you've done some cigarette smuggling cases and some other things. So what have been some of the cases in your area that came directly from a SAR, like I said, either building on something else that you were already investigating or actually identified a problem that sort of got you to where you are in terms of the investigation?
It's funny that how trends go, because I don't have any empirical data, but the money mule cases seem to be hitting us on a regular basis, and they're a challenge in themselves. They're really kind of tough cases in the sense of that whole internet fraud world and getting the true culprits, and you start a whole world of victim culprits. But just recently we're dealing with a case which I won't go into details on the bodies, but you're dealing with a and I always call it, I hate to disperse my own generation, but the baby boomer generation, a lot of us learned enough about the computers to get ourselves in trouble. So you see a lot of the scammers preying on that crowd in the sense of they're not as savvy on there. So when they start doing these romance scams and puppy scams and all the scams, what gets me, I guess at the end, that I'm concerned of in this latest one with the bank is we're dealing with an individual who probably never had a 4-figure balance in their account. And if it did, it was just when the government check came in, and all of a sudden is allowed to move over $1 million of cash through that account. It's kind of like, but by the time we get there, all the money's gone to the bad guy, and you're left with a senior victim. Right. Let's say that they helped in the scheme and they did some wittingly stuff in there, but they're very difficult person to try to run to some prosecutor and say, you should prosecute this retired person for being part of the scam. It's difficult for us, and then the money is well overseas somewhere that's kind of hard to trace to the real culprit.
And that makes sense. And I have some personal knowledge of some money mule cases, and it seems that they have it down to a T, in that they find people that are easily swayed to be kind, and they'll move money for these organizations. They'll get a little something for doing it, but obviously going after them is like, the analogy would be, we both know and have listened to Dr. Shelley talk about wildlife and organ trafficking. It's like going after the poacher, when the poacher's selling it to a larger organization, and you could arrest that person and put him away, but someone else is going to take the place. So really, is it worth the time of the prosecutor? Not that it wasn't criminal and knowledgeable when it was done, but to your point, there's, as they say, bigger fish to fry. Yeah,
when we talk, we always talking, you and me, and I'm very big and a promoter of that public-private partnership. It's just, I'm thinking there's, in this last couple ones, that there's something that needs to be done, and I hate to put it on the banks, but to stop that before it gets to where it gets to. And I somewhere getting nearly $1 million in less than 6 months through that count just seems like counterintuitive. That somebody should have put a stop along the way, other than simply filing the next SAR. But that's it. Just I guess it's just kind of tweaking the systems out there.
Let me ask you, a couple minutes we have left. There's so many things that are being discussed in terms of reforming the AML infrastructure. So on legislation, I'm not asking you to opine on legislation, because I realize that's done by different folks in sort of policy. But there has been some proposals on SARS specifically, and one that sort of struck me as potentially valuable, and it was discussed at one of your meetings, because that's where I first heard it, I think, and that was if they could recast the filing to create, these are my words, create a short form SAR for structuring. So the argument is you'd still file SARs on structuring, but the financial institution, they would get that information out of their systems, whatever systems they're using, SAS, Acuity, whatever it is, but they wouldn't have to spend extra time investigating. The thought process being, it's not the first number volume-wise of SARs anymore, structuring, but it's like top 3 or whatever. And so it would be in the system, so you'd still get it, but there wouldn't be all this other information that would have to be listed on the form, narratives and that kind of stuff. Conceptually, do you think that could, A, help the efficiency of the process, and B, would it have any negative implications for what you guys do? I don't,
I guess I'm kind of neutral on conceptually whether it's helpful or hurtful. Yeah. I mean, the biggest challenge, or the biggest promotion I'm doing now is the idea of just training more people in law enforcement well outside of our traditional AML community that we deal with all the time on the idea of having a very practical follow the money thought process in their investigative game plan anywhere. So it's kind of like getting used to, okay, what is useful in the SAR? What does it tell you? Because the SAR is just it's a tip. And from then then it goes to an investigator doing something beyond that. So short of a thin narrative, okay, it's a structure case. The area we've been working with some of these analytical companies out there, the many, people that provide services, and had some great analytical ideas about the SAR is the SAR, the FinCEN data is FinCEN data. It really gets valuable if it bounces off data outside of the FinCEN world. The difficulty is the confidentiality of the data. So we've had a real hard time of getting a position where we could take like our monthly SAR download and toss it into the people that do terrific work as far as doing the other open source analytics and mix matching on it. So that's the areas I don't think we do enough of, but it's still a challenge.
Right. I'll end on this. Not so much a question, but a compliment. I've been fortunate to attend several of your monthly monthly lecture series, for lack of a better term. But you're able to bring in people from the private and public sector, both as speakers and participants, to share information. For folks that haven't been part of that, tell us why you started that, and obviously you see the great value in it. Are other SAR review teams trying to emulate what you've done? But describe your process, because again, it's simple, but it's also very, very.
As you know, I'll use the reference. You and I being big lovers of the whole music world or whatever. I kind of call my place the Troubadour, in line with like that bar in LA, a dumpy little bar, but all the big acts show up there. I consider ourselves a dumpy little SAR review team, but I seem to get all the big acts and AML coming to my door. So it's been very enlightening, because I've really been fortunate. You said a lot of some of the speakers you have on your series have been here, and some of the people way out of my pay grade have been here to give speeches, from Dr. Shelley on out, and Steph Casella, and just some of the real players out there. So it's been a privilege, but it was started with one of our AUSAs a couple years ago, wanted something else to attract more people into the meeting, short of just the cops sitting around looking at SARS. And it just took off naturally from there. And to this day, I mean, for like, I coordinate with the AUSA up in Baltimore all the time. Hey, I had this speaker. They were great. You might want to, I think I referred you up to Baltimore one time as one of them. And then DC, John's team down there, people will kind of bounce off each other. Hey, I had this speaker. They were terrific. Or you ought to have somebody here. And then it's become, for me, it's just a challenge of who to reach out to. Unfortunately, before COVID-19, I reached out to a couple interesting people I think would have drawn some nice people. But, things happen, so maybe we'll catch back up with those folks once we can get together and socialize again.
Well, Steve, I know you're such a strong believer in private-public partnership, and have really taken it to a great new level, and appreciate it. And more importantly, just the work that you folks do with SARS. I think whenever I hear critiques, I'm like, you got to talk to the users, the people that find the value. And every time someone who's a tad skeptical hears more about something, they potentially change their point of view. So I really appreciate you doing that. So I'll let it go there. Steve, stay safe. We'll be in touch. You're kind enough. You're going to come help me teach my class Monday night. We're doing that online, of course, like everything else. So I really, the commitment that you have to teaching AML, fraud prevention, and financial crime is just so well appreciated. So
thank you, John.
Again.
Stay safe.